started. It looks like we got the main core group of people here. So to start off, we want to introduce you to your host for the afternoon, your presenter, Tom Hileman, our fearless leader here at Hileman Group. Tom has more than 20 years experience in marketing and information technology field, working with pioneers like Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, really considered an expert on business growth and success. And then along with that, he has an extreme specialization in industries like healthcare, B2B, finance, and manufacturing. So if you have any questions after the presentation, you can go ahead and reach out to Tom here at tom@hilemangroup.com or at the Twitter handle @HilemanGroup. So if you have anything above and beyond, feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, we'll kind of hop to our goes through the chat functionality. Our goal is for this to be interactive. We want to answer as much as we can. So our goal is to answer all those at the last kind of 20 minutes of the presentation. So please submit those through, and we'll capture as many as we can. As regards to scrambling to take notes, don't worry there. As a follow-up, we'll make sure to get you guys a recording as well as the entire deck for your records. So we'll get those out to you. If you're big on Twitter, please feel free to live tweet throughout the webinar. We have a hashtag of highlights, so feel free to leverage that as you go out throughout. We'll also be live chatting some of the highlights as well. And also, we'd like to hear from you. So if you don't want to reach out to Tom directly and just kind of want to reach out to the Hileman Group, you can also reach out to us at contact@hilemangroup.com. So any questions above and beyond, please feel free to let us know. But with that, those are the core notes, and I'll go ahead, I'll toss it over to Tom, and he can dive into the agenda.
Thanks, Kyle, and thanks everybody for making time in your busy schedules. I know how much is going on, and it's amazing that we're already over the February. So one of the things that at the Hileman Group, and for me personally, that's always been important is goal setting. And I think as we have weaved goal setting into kind of everything that we do, from our company to our projects to the work that we do internally. And it's a great way to measure where you are, measure where you want to go. And in a world that's increasingly busy and complex and frenetic, goal setting kind of gives you some clear direction as to what daily priorities, weekly priorities may be. So today we're going to talk a little bit about high-level goal setting and then do a little deeper dive into the process that we follow at Hileman in the context of working towards marketing goals. First, we're going to start with the framework. What's the background? What's the general approach into how you should do goal setting and the main components of it. Then we'll move in a little bit into the deeper dive into specifics around how to set goals, how to track goals, and how to achieve goals, most importantly. And finally, at the end, a couple of items. One, we're going to give a little key takeaway slide, kind of our half dozen suggestions that we think are really important in regards to goal setting, and kind of a roundup of the ideas for the day, as well as answer any questions that you may have. So we encourage that. The best way to improve in goal setting and for us all to learn is through interaction with each other. So we'll start at the beginning. What's the framework? And for the last 20 years, I've used this word called SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, results-oriented, and time-bound when we relate to goals. So we'll talk a bit in more specificity about measurements of goals here in a little bit. But the idea of any goal that you have in marketing or in life in general, it should be a SMART goal. And specific meaning it has to be something that you can actually tangibly think about or achieve. Oftentimes people want to have broader awareness of their marketing. Well, that's a very broad goal, and it's not very specific. So it falls down on the measurable, achievable, and the results-oriented, of course. So being very specific in what you want in life and in marketing is very important. It allows us to kind of, it's our laser focus for that. The measurable part, we're insane on measurement at Hileman, as many of you probably seen from our infographics and the marketing that we do. So as we talk about measurement, we try to measure everything, all aspects of what we do. Often a lot of folks talk about brand and awareness. Most of that can be measured through research, or the direct calls to action can be measured, conversion rates, all the things that you all know in the world of marketing. But specifically around goals, having measurements in them eliminates the question of, did we kind of get it or did we really get it, right? And so it allows us to be very precise in those, and did we achieve our goal or not. Achievable, great, the next one. So a goal should be a stretch, should be hard to do, but it shouldn't be impossible. So when we look at it, actually, if you set your goals too high initially, it can sometimes actually have a negative correspondence with your ability to do it, because you can get depressed. If you want to lose 20 pounds and your week 1 goal is to lose 15 of that 20 pounds, it's probably not going to happen, right? And it tends to have a negative feedback loop. So we want it to be a stretch, so it's not just easy. It's not losing half a pound, but it's something that's achievable within the time frame that you've put together and within the resources that you can allocate towards it. Results oriented. In our world of busyness and activity, people often mistake action for completion, right, and for achievement. And so we want to make goals that are results oriented, so that it can focus on the end product, not just the process through it. It's a little bit, we'll talk about Stephen Covey here in a bit, but beginning with the end in mind, and what results you want to achieve out of that. And finally, time bound. As with any goal, we'll talk about our process a bit more, but it should be bound by time, so that forces you to create marketing plans and activities that fit within that time to achieve those results. The more time specific you can be, the higher likelihood of achieving those. Achieving success is. So as we go through the deck today, we're going to focus on SMART and how it fits within the goal context. So let's talk about setting goals. First thing, right? First things first. If you don't know where you're going to go, you don't know how to get there. So setting goals is basically the baseline of where you're at today. So what you want to understand is, I guess the first rule of knowledge in life is know thyself, right? So you can't really move forward in life unless you know where you are today. So the first thing that you need to do in any of your activities in marketing is understand what the baseline, what is my level of awareness, what are my current conversion rates, what are my campaign-specific goals, all of those aspects that you're probably measuring today, right? You need to understand the baseline and then define from there how you want to move forward. So moving forward is what's success. At Hileman, when we look at our internal marketing goals, we review what we did last year, we measure that, we take a critical eye to it, and we always push to improve what that is. Even if we've got great open rates or great conversion rates, like we may have in specific campaigns, we always want them to be a bit better. So understand how to measure yourself. So what are those measurements that you can utilize in this? Second, continue to measure progress, right? So we start with the baseline, we set a goal of where we want to be, and then we want to have interim steps along the way to measure our progress towards that goal. So a lot of times, we call it pacing or trending, a lot of times people focus initially on this week or this month, but if we're having an annual goal, we want to make sure that you have kind of marks along the way, wayfinding to get ourselves there, so markers. So every month we want to know what that progress means, and it's okay if we're under or over, whatever that may be. Every plan is bad the minute that you finished it, because life gets in the way and the world really gets in the way. But without the plan, you don't have anything to fall back into kind of root yourself along the path. We're big fans of Drucker. So Peter Drucker is a great kind of management consultant theorist. But one of his tenets and what we live by here is if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So what you'd see if you're sitting in the Hileman offices with us today is we have displays up that have key metrics around our marketing and our business, and that we're maniacally focused on those specific metrics to make sure that we're achieving those. And often it comes down, in most cases, to 3 to 5 things that you have to track, whether it's in marketing, whether it's for an organization, whether it's for you as a person. Those are all the things that you want to keep your attention focused on, the core few that you can manage. So once you set your best baseline, then the next is to figure out the path forward, right? We call it a hierarchy of goals. Traditionally, most folks work in an annual planning from an operational level. At Hileman, for instance, we have a 10-year goal, a 3-year picture, and a 1-year window of what we do. So that way we're always keeping track of the larger trends in the industry. We break it, go work from 10 to 5, actually to 3 to 1. And then the 1 is where we tend to be very tactical. So we define the long-term vision from a long-term understanding of where we want to be as an organization or where you want to be from a marketing perspective. From there, you typically back it into what medium goals. So you may start with an annual goal target. Your medium goal may be quarterly goals to get from the long term. and then you set near-term goals, perhaps monthly or weekly, depending upon what you're doing. To quote Covey, begin with the end in mind. So when we have an end goal, we want to make sure that before we start every project, and people probably get tired of it hearing it at Hileman, is I always ask, what's our end goal, right? And it's remarkable by asking yourself that simple question when it comes to marketing activities, whether it's awareness or conversion, what are we really trying to do? And when you measure that and you begin with the end, at the end of this day or quarter or month, where do we want to be? It clarifies your thinking so much that you can focus on those critical items. So define the long-term, set medium goals along the way, and then manage and work the short-term. One of the things I personally do every day is look at my annual goals, both business and personal, and look at those for 5 minutes at the beginning of the day to make sure I'm focusing my activities for the day and for the week on those things that are most important to those core goals. And the same approach and activities applies to when we're doing the marketing. What do we really want to achieve? What are the set of campaigns? Back into smaller and smaller pieces. This also helps you to delegate within your teams. So for those of you who may direct teams, the idea is to set the vision so everyone knows what the alignment is, and then provide medium and short-term goals really allows people to know what they need to do in their daily activities. We call it clear line of sight. It's amazing how few organizations have that clear line of sight. When you do, it's also amazing what the people can do to help you achieve that. And so that's why we try to bring that clarity, and it always begins with a results-oriented mindset, as Stephen Covey outlines here in his simple but elegant quote. So what's that mean? So what's some examples of goals, right? So a bad goal, from our perspective, is to become an industry thought leader in the automotive retail space. So there's some goodness to the bad goal in that what you're trying to say is we want in our industry vertical, we want people to think of us first and understand that we can lead. We lead whether it's an engineering or a sales function or distribution, whatever that thought leadership position might be, that we want to be a leader there. But basically all it says is we want to be a leader in a fairly specific industry. The problem with that is you can't really measure it. It's not terribly specific, right? There's no way to know if you've achieved it and created the result, and there's no real time bound to it. So when you're applying effort and energy to it, there's no real way to know that. So what's better? So first of all, by the end of Q3 2017, notice the time-bound nature of that goal. Increase my brand's awareness and thought leadership in the Midwest region of the United States. So you've been specific about the geographic target that you're there. And then you also say, how will I do this? And these are very measurable. Speak at 3 local or regional events and 1 national trade show. Additionally, they'll publish a weekly blog post on industry topics and targets and topics with the target of doubling my post exposure page views month over month. In that second paragraph, those all are measurable. Those all perhaps are achievable depending on where you're at in your marketing plans. Certainly realistic and certainly time-bound. So whether or not those specific numbers are right, whether it should be 3 or should be 6 or should be post 2 times a month or 2 times a quarter, we can all argue that. But the answer is that's a little less important than having a nice place, having a well-stated goal that you can work from. Once you've got that, you can then revise the goal if you see yourself being more successful or less successful based on that. But it gives you a framework for success. So next step is tracking goals. So how do we do that? So one of the things that that I love to do is making everything measurable with whether it's scorecards or key performance indicators. So making goals measurable, and you can break down almost anything into measurements. Very few things can be not measured. They may not be precise measures. They may be aggregates. They may be judging influence, or maybe it's not the end result. Maybe we can't judge the attribution model in marketing. Could be first touch, could be last touch. Attribution, could be several different ways. But the key is to have measurements and hold to that. So one is making it measurable, and the second is the accountability of it. We found that creating measurements that everyone understands, keeping them simple so the team can rally around that is incredibly important. Also what's important in that is reporting on this weekly, monthly, quarterly, or whatever the frequency is. What's amazing is that when you tell folks that we're going to do these things, you announce it in front of a group of your peers, your teams, your customers, whatever they may be, that accountability time periods. It's the power of the status meeting. It's the power of the monthly dashboard. The power of all those things. When you don't have to display your progress and/or lack of, it's a lot easier to let it slide. Imagine how much weight we'd actually all lose if we had to weigh in at the office in front of everybody, right? The public display of that would make people hold to their goals or perhaps run in fear, whatever it might be. But the idea is get it out in front of people, make it a common, make it so everyone can understand there's no uncertainty in it, and then report it, and then from there just adjust and see. Sometimes you won't hit your goals right away, and that's okay. As long as we're, sailboats don't typically go in a straight line for where they're headed, right? They may have to tack back and forth, so we don't always know if we're exactly on or off course. And sometimes you finally need to adjust the goal. Maybe you don't have the resources to that. Maybe the industry won't allow, or it takes longer to get the awareness or to get the reach that you're looking for. Those things are all real life. We have to have trade-offs. We can't do everything or be everything to everybody. So as Galileo said, measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not so. Thousands of year old quote that's remarkably accurate today, and simply from marketing or from the planning of life when you're tracking your goals. So accountability, the second half of what we were talking about there, is make yourself accountable. This is probably the hardest thing. The natural flow of life is to not be accountable, but to get caught in the day-to-day and to miss the measurement and miss the responsibility that you have to produce those results, right? So how do you make yourself accountable? So there's some simple traps or techniques that you can do, and we've implemented in a lot of the process and the work that we do at Hileman Group. Create progress charts that you can hang in your chart in your office or your department. And our walls around our company, we have displays hanging up that show our key metrics and how we're doing to them. So it's right there, visible for anybody to see as they come through, is how are we doing? And where are we falling short, and where do we need to pick it up? And whether you make those, whether they're digital displays or simple pieces of paper, I for instance, have a single page printout that has all of my goals for 1 year that I carry with me at all times. It just is a constant reminder of the things I need to do and help me make my focus. And I have a chart to show how I trend on those. That's critical. The other thing is publicly saying, and not necessarily publicly shouting it out on Twitter or on Facebook, but finding a group of either close friends, colleagues, or customers, suppliers, whatever it may be, who will hold you accountable and will ask you the tough questions. How are we doing on this? Where are you? Why are we falling short? What do you need, right? You need that critical voice that can hold you accountable, that coach, for lack of a better word, that can say, where are we and why aren't we there today? Other ways to get that accountability out there is, for those of you in the digital space, write a blog, talk about it, right? It's amazing. The more that you put yourself out there about achieving a goal, the less likely it is that you're not going to get it done. The ability to show people and to put that commitment out is tremendous. And finally, I mean, the goal should be, when you're doing reporting, we've changed our reporting over time. We used to have all the details up front. Now we've kind of put the end of the story at the beginning to show what are our goals and how did we do, and then the details support to that in an extremely clear way. Helps to focus your efforts and helps you to understand, okay, this is really what I need to be, where I need to be, and it drives accountability. One of my favorite quotes from the great marketer Yoda was, do or do not, there is no try. The idea is that trying doesn't really count. I mean, there's benefit and effort, and obviously in life we want to all put maximum effort forward. However, you either did it or you didn't do it, and that's not either case isn't bad, right? Obviously, doing it is better than not doing it, but in the end, that's what you need to have. It has to be a binary state of being. The more specific you can be, the more you'll know that. And then the last one from a business perspective, when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported, the rate of improvement accelerates. It's a much more succinct way than I perhaps stated to say measurement. If you measure it, it will improve because people want that. And when you measure it and report it and tell people about it, they'll even improve farther because then you get give the benefit of the group, the collective helping with those ideas. The final thing here in tracking is document everything. So we tend to be a little bit zealous about this at Hileman. We have documentation about our process, about how we do things. But documentation helps you lead to the detail so there's no lack of interpretation of what you're looking to do. So as we mentioned earlier, organizing long-term, midterm, and short-term goals, document them, set up a regular cadence for checking in and making sure you're gauging steps, and benchmarking how your actions stack up to achieving those results, right? That documentation allows you at the end of the week, year, month, whatever it may be, to say how did we really do, and it also drives your accountability. As you document it, for whatever reason in life, the more when you write things down, either digitally or in person, they're much more likely to be achieved. If you look at the statistics, goals that are written down are about 80% more likely to be achieved than goals that aren't written down, which is crazy. We have that. But I think this last quote really summarizes, right? Goals that are not written down are just wishes, right? And wishes don't always come true. But goals do when you set up the context and the framework for that, and you have a much higher likelihood of achieving those items. So it's another example here. I think sometimes examples help. I feel like we've been really doing great this year. The team has been busy and we're seeing an increase in revenue. We must be trending well on the goals then, right? So revenue's up, that's good, right? You feel like you're getting activity or accomplishment done, excuse me, but you don't really know that, right? So what's a better way to say that from a marketing perspective, for example? So based on our monthly dashboards, we're on pace to achieve our blog engagement goal. However, we've only submitted 3 speaking abstracts with no responses. We better up our submission rate or we will not be able to hit our mid-tier goals. Let's add that to next month's action to make sure we have a greater focus on it. So how's that better? Well, first of all, it's a process. We have monthly dashboards, so clearly we're meeting and reviewing on those. Secondly, we're measuring our pace, right? So we have an overall end goal, and we're pacing that through our blog engagement, through our monthly numbers and whatnot. So and then if we're not tracking that, how do we react? Well, we up our submission rate, so we do more or get more successful at it so that we hit our midterm goals. So we know our near term, our midterm, our long term, and that ability here to tie together makes it a much more likely and a much more effective way to work through those items. Talk a little bit about achieving goals. So we talked about setting goals, we've talked about the accountability, right, of managing to that, and then a little bit about how do you achieve them, right? So this is probably the hardest part for everybody. Most folks understand the need to set goals and specificity and the time-bound elements of those and things we talked about. Most people understand the difficulties of reporting and accountability and whatnot. But a lot of times when the rubber hits the road, it's really how do you achieve your goals, right? And this is kind of a test of a person in an organization's character and culture, I guess I would say. So you have to promote what we call growth-oriented, or a culture of growth. One of our core values is growth-oriented. In the world that we all live in, specifically marketing, with the rapid change in tools and the emergence of new technologies and new companies, you have to continuously learn, right? And so if you can't promote a culture of growth, it's going to be very difficult to achieve goals in a pretty turbulent world. So what we often say is you don't really know anything until you've tested it and the data has told you it's true, right? So that's not true in all cases, but in many cases in marketing, it's really important to test. So as you look at these as your goals that you set in marketing and in life, you want to test how you're doing on that, or the ways to achieve. Every flop is a fact uncovered, which is a kind of a clever way of saying that you learn a lot more from the areas in life where you failed than where you succeeded. And I know that for me personally, that's true. I remember the deals that we've lost, the projects that haven't went as well as we've wanted them to go. They tend to stick and sear into my mind much more than something that went like clockwork. For whatever reason, there's some psychology, the biases to talk about there, I guess, if we want. But the reality is that we remember those failures, and they tend to drive us to improve behaviors and improve activities. So it's okay. Failing is part of success, and I think Ariana Huffington says it very well. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the success. It's part of the process, right? People often talk about overnight successes in life, but most of the time those are about 10 years in the making before they became overnight successes, right? In most cases. So what you need to do, and what we try to focus on at Hileman, is how do we promote a culture of allowing failure and embracing it and learning from that. So what we often call it is fail fast, fail forward, right? It's not okay to make the same mistake twice, because that's just wasting time. And fail forward towards the correct path. So the idea, what we do is we keep a log of our quality and our incidents of what worked well and what didn't work well. And from each of those, we try to learn why it happened, well, what happened, why it happened, and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again. That's the customer service quality of it. But as you're looking into achieving goals, the same thing. And often we use a little tool called stop, start, continue on our efforts. What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? What should we keep doing? Right? And as you start to measure things that aren't working, it's fairly easy to see using that simple tool how to respond and adjust. And then you got to learn from it, right? So it just takes time. It takes one of the jokes I always I say a lot. Maybe it's not a good joke, but where does good judgment come from? Well, it comes from bad judgment. Where does bad judgment come from? It comes from bad decisions, right? So when we make bad decisions, hopefully that leads to good decisions, and hopefully those decisions then lead to better judgment, right? So the only way to get better at something in most cases is to strike out a few times and then figure out where we're going. So you have to organizationally be okay with it. It's also important that when you're working in a team that we manage how critical we are of other people around things. If we want the opportunity to grow and we want the opportunity to fail, and we have to others that opportunity, right? And it needs to be smart, and it needs to be in lower risk areas. But it's important that we allow our coworkers and colleagues and the people in our lives that same luxury if we want them to achieve the same level that we're trying all to achieve. Achieving goals. So being realistic, not pessimistic, right? So this is probably maybe the hardest part. We all, as I think humans, are over ambitious in what we can do, how many times we're going to go to the gym, how many marketing campaigns we're going to get out, how broad our reach is going to become based on our awesome marketing tactics, right? So we got to balance realism with pessimism. Pessimism typically doesn't produce many results. A difference between being critical and keeping a critical eye on it, and then being a pessimist and holding things back, right? So, but I think the hardest part, I think the best part here is don't try to conquer the world in a day, right? So what we don't want to do is set goals that are too audacious, too much, and because they start to become almost a little bit self-defeating, right? So you have to temper yourself. Sometimes that 100% goal should be maybe 90% to make it just a little more likely. And we've seen in our work in marketing in that showing some early successes on campaigns, on a new tactic, on a new approach allows you to build experience and then build some momentum. So the importance of making those small steps towards a larger goal, as well as not trying to eat the elephant all at once, right? The classic project management term of how do you eat an elephant? you eat it one bite at a time, right? So it can be a daunting task when you're looking at a large end goal. You have to break it down into the pieces, and then you have to be able to stay with it. And as we mentioned here, you got to think big picture, but you can't forget the details, right? So most of life is the details. The importance of the goal setting is to focus us on the bigger picture, and then the shorter term and midterm goals help us reach those areas by giving us targets along the way. Another apropos quote here, Rome wasn't built in a day, which is kind of a classic thing to say, but they were laying bricks every hour. So the idea is that something of that scale of Rome, or the scale of a project like that, it certainly doesn't get done in a day, right? But you have to be making small achievements, even if it's laying a few bricks every hour towards that goal. And those small achievements will help us move along the way. So another example, so back into the world of marketing here. So, well, the first 2 blog posts we wrote had 0 visitors, and we've yet to get a response to a speaking abstract. This is plan to work, right? That sounds like a little pessimism's creeping in, right? So the activities aren't where we want them, not yielding the results. 0 is not a great number of visitors, and we're not getting our speaking abstracts responded to, which is not great if we want to have goals to get out in front of people to drive awareness, right? But tinged with a little bit of pessimism. What's better than this? Well, our first 2 posts were all about us, and we had no visitors. So a little self-inspection of perhaps the contact was a little bit too much focused on us internally, which often happens in marketing, inside baseball, or speaking about our own industry, our own selves, right? Well, what do we learn from that? Let's change the way we approach this and write more helpful content to the most important people in the world of marketing, our customers and prospective customers, right? And perhaps we find some smaller speaking gigs that can build our resume before we go and try to speak at the largest industry trade show, right? So we haven't failed, right? We learned, right? We've been a little bit self-centered in our content, perhaps a little over-ambitious in where we wanted to speak. So let's reset the goals and reset the momentum to get up the hill. And that's, I think, the better part. It's a more it's being critical of yourself, judging what you've done, but then being optimistic is what can we do? And that's often when life, what you have to focus is what can you do. You can't focus on what you can't do, right? Because you can't change any of that. So it's a very kind of important way for us to work through that. So what are the key takeaways? So one of the things we say a lot and we believe in is failing to plan is the same as planning to fail, right? And so without setting goals, it's pretty much the same as having no goals. The goals, this wishes concept that we talked about a little bit. The importance of the plan is not the perfect plan, and there has never been a perfect plan that's ever been created. It gives you the starting point that allows us to adjust and change based on what the real world throws at us. And so it's the critical importance of knowing to plan and then using that as a tool to help us get to success on our projects and campaigns. And one of the things I say a lot is hope is not a plan, right? So we want to plan for the worst and hope for the best, and hopefully things will be there, and maintain that optimism. But that optimism isn't the plan. The plan is the hard work that goes into defining the path along which we go. Second, the process and discipline of setting the goals and managing that is a lot more important than the specific goals themselves, right? We can change the specifics. We can become more aggressive. We can become less aggressive if we need to. But establishing the discipline of consistently setting goals, consistently managing our activities, and holding ourselves accountable produces behaviors and habits that will lead you almost always to success. Whether it takes 2 years or 5 years to get where you want to go, it's almost assured when you do goal setting that you're going to get there at some point. However, it's not assured if you don't have those goals, and we've all seen projects or even folks' careers that have kind of languished because they haven't set goals and they've kind of just keep doing what they're doing. They're going to keep getting what they've been getting, right? So just that discipline and the management of that and process yields great results. You have to stick to it. One of the things we talk a lot is the difference between simple and easy. So to use our weight analogy, it's really simple to understand what you have to do. Exercise more, eat better, pretty much the main 2 things that you have to do if you want to lose weight, right? That's pretty simple. We just said it. That maybe is a diet success plan that everybody in the world could use, right? However, it's not very easy, right? So getting up to go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning every day after you had a rough night, or the kids were up overnight, or whatever it might be, is a lot more difficult. It's simple in terms of the decisions you need to make, but it's not easy to do, right? So that's where the discipline and the goals come in. The goal being able to see where you want to be at the end of the goal. So writing all those blog posts, staying on top of your editorial calendar when it's easy to let a day or a week or a few items slide, right? That's the kind of the easy way to go. It's simple to understand what you should do. It's a little bit harder to make sure that you're always doing that. So one thing that is assured is there's always going to be obstacles, right? Henry Ford said that the obstacles are the scary things that you see when you take your eyes off the goal, right? So, so you have to plan for them. You have to do some risk assessments of what is likely to get in our way, what's likely to cause us problems. In most cases, we know that, right? Most of the things, the risks in the projects, in the campaigns, our message, our call to action not being clear, or our call to action not being compelling enough, our inability to perhaps reach the targeted audience in a defined way. Those are all risks, and we probably know that as marketers. We know most of those risks and what they are. The black swan events, as they call them, the one thing in 10 years that happens, those you can't plan for, right? So we plan for the ones that we can, and then we know, what I often say is, we know when to ignore the other ones and go through them when they get in our way, right? Sometimes in life you just got to go through the obstacle as opposed to around it. So we want the planning to know about the obstacles, but we also want the ability and the desire to kind of drive through. And finally, at the end of the day, when you're stuck or you're uncertain, sometimes you just got to make progress. Sometimes you just have to lay the bricks, right? And it may not seem like you're making very much of the wall around Rome, to our example before, right? But you're a few more bricks ahead, right? So sometimes cranking out that last blog post, getting out that Facebook post, right? Getting those activities that try to drive those results. Sometimes it's work and you feel like you're stuck in the mud, and you just have to do the activities that you've done your planning are going to know you're going to yield some result to move you somewhere closer to the goal. So hopefully these key takeaways are helpful as you look at marketing and your overall goal setting. I think we're towards the end of this presentation, so the next step up are some questions that I believe we've had a few roll in from the crew.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Great presentation there. Looks like we had a few questions come in, so let's go ahead and dive into them. So the first one we have here, could you give an example of a goal you set for your company in 2017, and how are you working to achieve that?
Sure. So we'll talk about marketing, since this seems to be a marketing area of focus. So we will just every year go through, review, recap our previous year's goals, and then reset and re-engage those. So one of our goals, one I'm really passionate about, is kind of doubling the size of our engagement list. So the people who are engaged with us in our marketing through events like webinars, through emails, through our social interactions and whatnot. So we set a goal of doubling our kind of subscriber list, or our engaged list with us. We have some metrics about what we consider engaged to be. But with that goal, then we always have to write down the hows. How do we think we're going to achieve that? So we talk about outreach efforts that we can do from the individual folks in the agency. We have from our social interactions. We have working our LinkedIn networks. We have a sequence of tactics to drive that size of that database list, and then we can measure our progress by quarter, by month, throughout the year. So we try to be very specific, and then we can hold ourselves accountable to whether we met those or not. But that we also have goals around MQLs, marketing qualified leads, conversion rates as well on our marketing side. But that's kind of how we focus ourselves, very specific, very tangible goals.
Very nice. So we got another one here. Do you have an opinion or kind of setting a number of goals so there isn't too many in the list?
Sure. Usually when we do our annual planning for our company, we have 3 to 5 goals that are high-level goals that everything else that we do ties to. So I like the numbers 3 to 5 because I think it's easy to remember and keep them all top of mind. It's also when people have 3 or 5 things on their desk, it's a little easier to manage than having 10. So personally, all my personal goal setting has typically 4 to 5 goals a year. Our business is typically 3 to 5. and those go from high level down to our managers and directors who have responsibility in those 3 to 5, down to the individual employees who may be working on a smaller part of that. But I believe 3 to 5 is kind of the best way to do that, just because it keeps it manageable enough without having to really, once you get past half a dozen to a dozen, it becomes very difficult to kind of maintain that thinking.
Awesome. Very nice. It looks like we got a few more coming in here. See here, when setting goals for your business, do you have any recommendations on how we split goals between business goals like revenue growth versus vanity metrics like number of website visits or social followers?
Sure. Well, I think as marketers, and sometimes executives call them, we call them vanity metrics, kind of the metrics total. I think a lot of executives fall into the trap of how much reach do we have? We reached 12 million people or whatnot, right? I think the more important goal is how many of those do we convert to customers and how much revenue do we drive, right? So the issue is, though, is that those vanity metrics are important to measure along the way, because if you're not getting a broad enough audience, then your other goals aren't as likely to achieve. So I think we typically set our goals are about 2/3 specific conversions, about 1/3 around the vanity metrics. So I'm just watching the key vanity metrics where we need to for audience reach and size and high-level activity, but the majority of our goals are much more around conversions and direct response models, because I think that's where we can manage it much more effectively as a company.
Awesome. Then we got one more on here right now, so we'll hit that one. Being the president of your company, how do you encourage your team to not be afraid of failing?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I think you need to be patient. I think you need to allow people to fail. I think you need to create opportunities where people can take initiative and let them know that they're trusted, and it's okay to fail. So I think part of it's culture, part of it's understanding what how people can be treated, should be treated to encourage that type of behavior. I think part of it's also creating opportunities. I think we need to create opportunities where people feel like they can take initiative and take on a new campaign or a new project or a new activity without feeling any undue pressure to not fail and to be perfect on things. So sometimes I say the enemy of the perfect is the good, or the enemy of the good is the perfect. Kind of goes both ways. So the ability to set it up to let people know it's okay to take these measured risks and to risk failure, and we have your back, but to also let them know they have enough accountabilities to deliver results.
Awesome. And it looks like we had one more come in there while you're answering that last one. Is it too late to set goals for 2017?
It's never too late to set goals. So I think no matter where you are in life or in business, we're pretty much we're a little over halfway through the first quarter, so you have to be measured in what you can do in Q1 of 2017. But there's no reason you still can't set your goals and then measure your achievement towards them. So yes, so I would highly encourage it. It's never too late. Just the effort of doing and setting the goals will help crystallize it for the next time you do it. So it may not be as successful in 2017 if you don't get the whole year plan done up front. So it's better to have it done up front, but it's certainly much better than not having goals to kind of do abbreviated goals if you're partway through the year. Great.
Great. So with that, it looks like we got one more that rolled in on that question as well. Do you have any suggestions or resources that could help supplement the discussion?
Sure. I think we have an extra slide here at the end with some books that we reference. I think that would help. So we referenced some of these folks when we were talking with the quotes. There's no Yoda book here, I guess, but some great books that I utilize to kind of help focus some of my thinking. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's one of the most profound books ever written. It's a great read, and a lot of it is the basics of goal setting, beginning with the end in mind, continuous growth, sharpening the saw. So I highly recommend that. And that's kind of that's the book that we make all of our interns and our intern programs read as part of their summer interns to try to understand that. Peter Drucker's Essential Drucker, which is kind of a roll-up of many of his best works. A great management consultant, management theorist, and just has some tremendously good information on how to be an effective executive, how to make decisions, how to be efficient and effective with the use of your time, and goal setting is weaved throughout that. Ariana Huffington, the Huffington Post, her book Thrive is a little different aspect of it, a little more well-rounded, where Peter's is very much a business-focused, and Stephen Covey's is very much just a pure life focus. Ariana takes the tact of kind of rolling it all together, of both life and business and all the things that you do, gives me a great approach on how to thrive in the world that we live in. And then one of the best business books I've ever read, it's a tough read, Michael Porter's Competitive Strategy, a tremendous way, if you're looking at from a business perspective, as to how to create value in the industry you are, how to understand the dynamics of competition, and how to compete there. It's great. Everyone who's in a leadership position in business should read it. Actually, everyone in business should read it. It's a tough book. It's a long book, but it boils down to some pretty basic essentials on how to have success in business, and a lot of that is around setting of goals as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom, and of course, thank you all who attended this version of Highlights Presents. As we said in the housekeeping notes, we'll have a follow-up email that will get you guys this presentation deck, but also the recording. So thanks so much for attending, and thanks for all your great questions. Keep an eye out. There'll be more Highlights Presents coming within probably the next month or so. So keep your eye out, and thank you so much.